Good morning, Dr. Lui, Professor Sung, Sir Colin, Dr. Liu, distinguished guests from Lu Chihuo Prize, and Médecins Sans Frontières. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lu Chihuo Prize, Prize for World Civilization Laureate Public Lecture by Médecins Sans Frontières. Lu Chihuo Prize 2016 Welfare Betterment Prize Laureate. My name is Annie, an undergraduate student of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Today, we're greatly honored to have invited Mr. Remy Carrier, Executive Director of Médecins Sans Frontières, and Dr. Natasha Reyes, Manager Emergency Response Support Unit of Médecins Sans Frontières, to deliver a lecture on the university campus. First of all, may I invite Professor Joseph Sung, Vice-Chancellor of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, to deliver a welcoming address. Professor Sung, please.
The Honorable Dr. Lui, Sir Colin Lucas, Dr. Charles Liu, Mr. Carrier, Dr. Reyes, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to Lu Chihuo Prize, Prize for the World Civilization Laureate Public Lecturate. We are privileged to have Dr. Lu Chihuo, founder of this distinguished award, to be with us today. As a renowned philanthropist, Dr. Lui has been generously contributing to the betterment of our society and sowing seeds of benevolence for those in need. Dr. Lui has made magnificent donations in support of the development of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, in particular our Faculty of Medicine. We're truly grateful for Dr. Lui's unfailing support towards CUHK over the years. Let's give Dr. Lui a round of applause. I would also like to extend our warmest welcome to the speakers from Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, Mr. Carrier, Dr. Natasha Reyes. Congratulations to MSF for being awardee of the Lu Chihuo Prize 2016 Welfare Betterment Prize Laureate. Dr. Lu Chihuo Prize, inaugurated this year, is an extension of Dr. Lui's benevolence to extol those individuals and organizations who have dedicated themselves to the nurturing and enrichment of world civilization. This prestigious award, we believe, is a strong motivation for the awardee to keep up their momentum, strive for excellence, and inspire others to build a better world together. This year's Lu Chihuo Prize, Welfare Betterment Prize Laureate, is MSF. The award is the most fitting recognition of MSF's indispensable contribution to the treatment and control of cholera outbreak in Haiti in 2010 and Ebola epidemics in West Africa in 2014. Just now, while we have a drink outside, I had a chat with Dr. Liu, the director of MSF for this region, and we share a lot of fears and some experience in Ebola, which is sort of similar to SARS some 13 years ago in this region. Being one of the largest medical humanitarian organizations in the world, MSF endeavored to deliver emergency aid to people in need, irrespective of their race, religion, gender, or political affiliation, including those affected by armed conflicts, epidemics, natural disaster, and exclusion from health care. With their staunch support, welfare of mankind has been significantly improved. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to MSF for their selfless contribution to the betterment of mankind. Shall we give them a big round of applause? Today, we at the Chinese University of Hong Kong are very honored to host the Lu Chihuo Prize 2016 Welfare Betterment Prize Laureate Public Lecture, to be delivered by Dr. Remy Carrier, Executive Director of MSF Hong Kong, and Dr. Natasha Reyes, Emergency Response Support Unit Manager of MSF Hong Kong, and Medical Coordinator for MSF's Ebola intervention in Liberia in 2014. Professor Francis Chen, our Dean of Faculty of Medicine, will later give you a more detailed introduction of our two speakers. And here I wish everybody have an enjoyable lecture and do share their inspiration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Song. May I invite Professor Sir Colin Lucas, Prize Recommendation Committee member of Liu Chi Wo Prize, to introduce this prestigious award. Sir Colin, please.
Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Louis, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me say on behalf of the Prize Recommendation Committee how grateful we are to CUHK for having co-hosted this event. And if I may say on my own behalf, what a personal pleasure it is to be back here again in CUHK and to see once again your Vice-Chancellor, Joseph Chung. I'm here to introduce the prize. I know you're not here to listen to me, so I'm going to be as brief as I can, but being an ex-Vice-Chancellor, you can never turn down the opportunity to say something in public. This prize, the Liu Chi Wo Prize for World Civilization, is focused on the welfare of humankind. The welfare of humankind by the betterment of the conditions in which we live, the harmony between us, and the sustainability of our civilizations going into the future. And as we look around the world that we find ourselves in today, who can deny that this isn't an absolutely fundamental concern? And so I think that the first characteristic of this prize that we need to note is that it is the first of its kind in the sense of its cross-cutting quality across the whole of the human experience as it concerns our future. It's in fact made up of 3 awards. There are 3 prizes each year. Sustainable Development of the World is the first one. The Betterment of the Welfare of Mankind is the second one. And the third prize is the Promotion of Positive Life Attitude and Enhancement of Positive Energy. And these are annual prizes. So we expect this prize to make a real impact as we grow more mature over the years to come. The second characteristic of this prize is that it is, I think, an extraordinarily valuable prize, and that in turn will make it have a serious impact. But the generosity of the founder, Dr. Louis, is extraordinary in this matter, and we should be really grateful to him, I think, for this initiative. And the third characteristic of the prize is that the 3 prizes shift their focus every year within this general this general definition. Now, the current year, the prizes we're giving now, the Sustainability Prize had its focus on the world food supply, on its safety and security. And that was awarded to Professor Yuan Longping. The second prize, the Welfare Betterment Prize, it was focused on the treatment and control of epidemics, infectious diseases, or chronic illnesses. And we are going to hear today from the Médecins Sans Frontières, who are the laureates. And the third prize, the Positive Energy Prize, this year is for individuals or organizations whose behavior and achievement inspire, energize, and give hope to others. And the laureate is James Jimmy Carter, ex-president of the United States. But next year, the 3 prizes have a different focus. So next year's Sustainability Prize will be focused on the prevention of climate change. The Welfare Betterment Prize will be focused on the alleviation of poverty. And the Positive Energy Prize will be focused on the promotion of harmony among diverse groups. So I hope that you will look forward to seeing us again with different laureates next year.
Thank you, Sir Colin. May I invite Professor Francis Chen, Dean of Medicine of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, to introduce Médecins Sans Frontières and the speakers. Professor Chen, please.
Dr. Lui, Sir Colin, Mr. Carrier, Dr. Reyes, Professor Song, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great honor to introduce today's speakers, Mr. Remy Carrier and Dr. Natasha Reyes from Médecins Sans Frontières, Hong Kong. They represent the awardee of the inaugural Welfare Betterment Prize of the呂志和Prize for World Civilization. The title of today's lecture is From the Worst Ebola Epidemic to the Brutal Hospital Attacks, the first-hand experience and perspectives of the Médecins Sans Frontières. Mr. Remy Carrier is Executive Director of MSF Hong Kong. He joined MSF in 1993, working in Angola and then Afghanistan as a logistician and administrator. He continued to work as logistics and technical coordinator for MSF's projects in China and different African countries. From 1998 to 2000, he worked for the MSF Operational Center in Brussels as the logistic manager, providing support for a range of field missions. In 1999, he participated in the emergency relief operation in Albania, responding to the refugee influx from Kosovo and then to Turkey following the earthquake in Dusek. From 2000 to 2005, Mr. Carrier was the director of the logistics department in MSF's operational center in Brussels. He took part in the reopening of medical programs in Afghanistan after MSF withdrawing its international staff shortly after 9/11 due to increased insecurity. He also went to Banda Aceh, Indonesia for the post-tsunami emergency intervention at the end of 2004. Having worked for a foundation for 2 years, Mr. Carrier worked with MSF again in 2007 as head of mission in Kenya and then in Thailand. He took up the post as Executive Director of MSF Hong Kong in August 2010, and within MSF, he is also the member of Executive Committee, which is the core decision-making body, and a member of Information Systems Management Committee. And Dr. Natasha Reyes is the Emergency Response Support Unit Manager of MSF Hong Kong. She has been working with MSF since 2007. And Dr. Natasha Reyes is from the Philippines, where she obtained her medical doctorate from the University of Santo Tomas and specialized in emergency medicine at the Makati Medical Center. She was inducted as a fellow of the Philippine College of Emergency Medicine in 2007 and has participated in numerous training and workshops on medical emergency response and has completed the European Masters of Disaster Management Program. Dr. Reyes had worked as a field doctor, ER doctor, field coordinator, medical coordinator, and emergency coordinator in emergency and unstable contexts. She had worked in many places like India, Kenya, South Sudan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Libya, Philippines, Colombia, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Nepal, dealing with outbreaks such as measles, cholera, hepatitis E, and Ebola, natural disasters, displaced populations, and trauma care in conflict zones. One of her recent field missions was serving as the medical coordinator for MSF's Ebola intervention in Liberia in 2014 and head of mission for the Nepal earthquake intervention in 2015. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call on you to join me in thanking Mr. Carrier and Dr. Reyes for sharing experiences and insights gleaned from their life-saving stories in MSF, raising our awareness and opening windows of possibilities and opportunities for the work of MSF to scale new heights of success. And once again, thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you, Professor Chan. Now, without further ado, may I invite Mr. Remy Carrier, followed by Dr. Natasha Reyes, to deliver a lecture on From the Worst Ebola Epidemic to Brutal Hospital Attacks, the first-hand experience and perspective of Médecins Sans Frontières. Mr. Carrier, please.
Dr. Lui, Professor Sung, thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to address to this full house. I'm sure that you have heard about MSF, and MSF has always believed that medical care should reach the most depraved and vulnerable, and that it's everyone's responsibility to fight against avoidable suffering. My colleague, Dr. Natasha Reyes, will give you some powerful evidence from her experience in West Africa, fighting against the Ebola outbreak, and to illustrate how the world has not always taken that responsibility seriously enough. On my side, I'm going to talk to you about another way in which the international community is failing. It's failing the duty to patients and medical staff. The disgraceful attacks that are happening against defenseless patients, their carers in war zones. And this is a topic that is all over the media for the time being with Syria. I'm going to explain why this is such a big concern for us as humanitarian workers, why it should concern everyone, because it's eroding respect of laws and standard of basic decency, why it is representing a huge dilemma for MSF, and what the world could do about it if only there was enough political will. The scale of concern. When I say attacks happening today, I mean that almost literally. There are chances that, somewhere around the world, a medical facility is going to be attacked today, or in the past 24 hours. As an example, the last one that got reported was in Aleppo on Monday. MSF has felt these blows particularly hard in Syria and Yemen. 21 medical structures that we support in those countries have been bombed or shelled since the beginning of this year. In 2015, we recorded 94 attacks on MSF-supported hospitals just in Syria. But not only in these countries, this is happening also in Ukraine, in Sudan, or in Afghanistan. On October 3rd, so just a year ago, we lost 42 staff and patients in a sustained aerial strike that took place in our trauma center hospital in Kunduz in Afghanistan. I will return later on to highlight some of the lessons from this massacre. MSF has been badly hit because we choose work in conflict areas where needs are great, and our years of security experience make possible for MSF to be able to work in these conditions. For more than 40 years, MSF has negotiated the protection of its medical facilities in conflict around the world. But we are only able to count those attacks that happen in facilities that we are connected to. Many more attacks have been happening on structure where MSF is not working. In Syria, today, the few brave doctors that remain are being systematically eliminated. These attacks are completely against international humanitarian law and the Geneva Conventions. And I will take you through some of the reasons why at a later stage today. The pattern of attacks. Of course, it's not completely entirely new. Wars have been brutal, always. And today's civil war follow the pattern of history. They are the most ruthless and unforgiving. In this violence, it's not just directed at hospitals and patients. It is part of a general and disgusting assault on civilians, particularly in Syria today. Some have called this war on civilians. In April, an hospital has been bombed in Aleppo. It was called the Al-Quds Hospital. And the director said this: "I can understand the importance of the call for respect for hospital. But soon, there will be no patient to go for treatment there." That destruction of anything and everything in Aleppo is still going on today, and you see that all over the media. It is part of an integrated war strategy by the government of Syria and its international allies to eliminate resistance there by crushing all the final supports for life. The same disregard for the protection of medical facilities, staff and civilian life is also going on regularly in Yemen. In early August, the MSF hospital in Abs was destroyed by Saudi-led coalition airstrike. 19 people were killed, among them patients and health workers. It was the fourth such attacks against MSF facilities in Yemen in less than 1 year. It has killed 32 people and injured 41 in total. Our team had to withdraw from the north of Yemen, leaving all this population without any access to health care. Today, in Syria, Yemen, or Afghanistan, rules of engagement are so loose that wars truly stand apart. Rules of engagement are the framework that are framing and giving a mandate to an army in a certain country. So you are having, rules of engagement for the Blue Helmet in Central African Republic that are, of course, very different from the rules of engagement of the US in Afghanistan. I will come a bit later on that. War are framed by laws. The duty of treating the wounded and sick and the protection of medical personnel and facilities has been at the core of the international humanitarian law since its inception in 1864. This was further enshrined in the 4 Geneva Conventions of 1949 and 2 additional protocols of 1977. Laws of war, old. It's not something only for today. It has been developed many, many, many years ago. Under international humanitarian law, as soon as people are wounded, and this is very important, they are protected, no matter how they were wounded. A combatant who is wounded and ceases fighting can no longer be considered as a combatant. They must be collected and given medical care within the minimum delay possible. Also, under IHL, medical personnel have the duty to treat all patients without discrimination. Patients are not registered according to their ethnicity, politics, religion, or participation in prior hostilities. They are prioritized for treatment only according to their medical needs and the urgency which they need to be seen. Withholding care or providing care in a discriminatory fashion is strictly prohibited. It is a breach of medical ethics as well as the Geneva Convention. It can amount to a war crime. A lot of people are asking us, you, MSF, are you treating Taliban? Yes, a Taliban patient is a patient we are going to treat. Are you going to treat an Islamic State militant if he's wounded? Yes, we have to. We will do that. Are you going to treat a military from the US? Yes, we will do. We are doctors. This is our role. This is our duty. It is framed by a legal environment as well. We are neutral, impartial. The strike on MSF Kunduz Hospital. We believe that what happened, sorry, I'm not following up. We believe that what happened to our trauma hospital in Kunduz, northern Afghanistan, just a year ago, is a terrible illustration of law breaking. MSF was performing its duty under the Geneva Convention by treating any and all patients in the area. At 2 a.m. on the 3rd October 2015, precise repeated strike from US plane destroyed the hospital. The strike killed 42 people, including 14 staff. Patients burnt in their beds. There were, shots from the air trying to shoot the people that were fleeing the building. What we did, we called the hotline of the US forces, but the attack continued for many more minutes. This is the hospital compound. You see, it's after the attack. The T building was our trauma center, and around these are offices. It was very targeted. It was a plane with propeller that flew over, circling around the building for 45 minutes shooting. So it's not a bomb that fell like that. It's really targeted large attack, killing 42 people. Since it had happened we have opened this structure in 2011. 15,000 free surgery have been conducted in this 100-bed, high-level, trauma center. The GPS coordinate has been communicated to all parties, and a strict no-weapon policy was in place. All weapons were dropped off at the door. What does that mean, no-weapon policy? To have an hospital protected by the Geneva Convention, you have to make sure that any combatant entering into the building will drop his gun. And then this hospital cannot be used as a fighting place, so no shot can be fired from the hospital, and then this hospital falls under the protection of the Geneva Convention if it is properly identified. This is what we have done. We were in complete control of this hospital, and the Taliban were not occupying this hospital. Why I'm talking about law, then after the Kunduz incident, we are into a world where anti-terrorist framework has been applied for a couple of years now. And we are greatly concerned. Overriding commitments by states to that law and to the Geneva Convention are now being overtaken by exceptions based on domestic and often anti-terrorist law. Those domestic laws and regulation are being manipulated to permit things that would be regarded as illegal in the international law. And of course, many of the worst conflicts today are civil wars within a state, rather than conflict in between two sovereign states. For example, and to give you an example of how domestic laws can be manipulated, the Syrian government in 2012 declared providing medical care to victims of violence in opposition-controlled areas as illegal. So the medical facilities had to be forced to operate secretly in unarmed, unmarked, and undeclared location, and without any access to medicine and medical supply provided through the Syrian government health system. I told you earlier, in Afghanistan, we provided our GPS coordinate. Our hospital was very well known, visible by all. In Syria, we had to hide. We have been building an hospital in a chicken farm. So the chicken farm was turned into an hospital. We were working in caves. Okay? We were turning certain nice villas into hospitals. We were hiding, and only the population that knew where we were could reach. So, in this situation in Syria, because of the law, we had to hide. So by designating or labeling armed opponents as criminals or terrorists, the government can sidestep the constraints of the law of war and go after its enemies in an unrestricted fashion. That makes it extremely difficult for humanitarian workers in that environment. We are, and we can be accused or even targeted for aiding and abating people who are designated as terrorists. This is the story we heard in Afghanistan. People were targeting us because they thought that we were helping the Taliban. That's why probably we have been targeted. It should say that as well, of course, that we are already under threat from some non-state group like Islamic State. So it's not only states that put us under pressure. I have to report that certain groups today are not respecting international law or are not respecting our impartial status. So regularly these groups are attacking us or kidnapping us. This is what has happened in Syria. And justice. In Afghanistan, we know that this tension in between domestic and international law was already present, even if this was not the direct cause of the coup's attack. Of course, we have strongly pressed the US authorities to explain how a well-known and identified hospital could have been deliberately targeted. We conducted our own internal investigation, which could not determine in a satisfactory answer to that. The US military investigation, it's a very large document, with large part of the document that has been redacted or hidden for security reasons, said in essence that this was the result of a series of unfortunate operational and technical errors. Sorry, it's a mistake. We have not accepted that explanation. We pressed for the activation of an international machine. It was a dormant machine, the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission, to investigate independently. But to activate this International Fact-Finding Commission, it needs that the states involved need to support it, and the Americans to agree. It did not happen neither. When an attack occurs, it should neither be the responsibility of the victims nor the perpetrators to establish and analyze the facts. As of today, suspected perpetrators get away with self-investigating, and there is no independent follow-up for these attacks. MSF is not seeking for justice. We seek for accountability. And practically, we ask for clarity on the facts, on the circumstances, and on the intentions that explain an attack like the one in Kunduz, in order to take appropriate measure and secure commitments towards preventing further attack. This is the most important. We don't want this to happen again. We don't want justice. We don't want this to happen again. The UN machinery. Following pressure from MSF, amongst others, in May 2016, the UN Security Council unanimously adopted a resolution which strongly condemned attacks and threats against the wounded, the sick, the medical and humanitarian personnel exclusively engaged in medical duties. A resolution has been signed. The Council also demanded that all parties to armed conflict comply fully with their obligation under the international law, including the Geneva Conventions. However, and you know, since this resolution has been signed, attacks continue. Medical facilities, the resolution 2286, which is its name, and international humanitarian law are not at all respected today. We have to understand also that 4 of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council are today actively engaged in the conflict that continues to show, and they continue to show their disrespect to this law. Today, on the 5 countries, 4 are part of international coalitions that are in war in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Mali, in Afghanistan or elsewhere. The Secretary General last month reported back to the Council on implementation measures, which look good on paper. We are not optimistic about their implementation. Our international president, Dr. Joan Liu, spoke in the Security Council last week and demanded a real operational commitment to change. What is needed? So what can be done about it? We are calling for some very basic, simple changes to the current trend of behavior. State needs to take their responsibility and to live by civilized standards. In an age when the war is fighting under the name of the counter-terrorism with special forces on the ground, a license to kill all has been issued. We call on all the states to revoke this license. Military action and humanitarian needs must be balanced. Attacking hospitals and medical workers is a non-negotiable red line. It has to be clear in all military manuals, in the rules of engagement, and standard operating procedures. To stop the abuses, there must be accountability and credible independent investigations. The impunity must end. Our political and only political pressure and accountability will bring this about. And to finish with, I will quote one of the op-ed that we have been writing. A war without limits leads to a battlefield without doctors. We will not sit silently by and let this happen. If you want to know more, if you want to support us, Emergency Stop, not a target. You are in the age of being on the social media and on the internet, so please support us on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carrier. May I also invite Dr. Reyes to come onto the stage and deliver the lecture?
Good morning, everyone. I think it's still morning. Dr. Liu, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to talk to you about the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, which was mainly happened in 2014. I can stand here in front of you for one whole day to talk about it. There's so much to say, but since I don't have all day, and you should be having lunch very soon, I will tell you a little bit about what happened, a bit about what I saw there, but really focus on what should we do now? What's the way forward? Okay? And if you want to know more details, there's a Q&A after. So I may speed through some of the slides, but I will try to keep it rather short. Okay. So quickly, what is Ebola? So many resources in it online, you can always look it up. But basically, it's one of the 3 filoviruses. It's transmitted to humans from wild animals, and then it spreads in the human population through human-to-human transmission by close contact. People who get sick of Ebola have a 25% to 90% chance of dying from it. And the average case fatality rate is 50%. 3 out of the 5 species of Ebola have caused large outbreaks in Africa: Zaire, Bundibugyo, and Sudan. And it's the Zaire strain that popped up in West Africa in 2014. Sadly, the Zaire strain is the one that has the highest case fatality rate. It can go as high as 90%. So how did MSF end up working in Ebola? It all started in 1995 in Congo. Now, we started working in Ebola mainly on water and sanitation, while other organizations, such as the World Health Organization and the US CDC, were doing patient care. However, we increasingly got more involved into the protection of health workers. Why? Because health workers are very much at risk, and also because health workers are such a precious and rare resource in these areas. So we moved from water and sanitation to protection of health workers, and eventually into hands-on patient care. And at some point, we found ourselves actually the frontliners and the main actors in responding to Ebola outbreaks. And why is a private medical organization the one being the main actor in Ebola? We actually, at that time, didn't really see anything wrong with it. Why? Because Ebola was affecting small rural communities in Central Africa. it was so manageable. Just as an example, in the previous outbreaks, before this one, in the previous outbreaks, the average size of our Ebola treatment centers was 15 to 20 beds. The largest one we've ever had before was 40 beds. Now, moving to this outbreak, in Elwa 3, in Monrovia, one of our treatment centers, we had 250 beds. So this is much bigger than anything we'd ever seen before. And MSF is not the only one saying that. According to Dr. Frieden of the US CDC, the level of this outbreak is beyond anything we've ever seen or anything we've even imagined. Just to show you, this is a map, obviously, and the red circles are actually the previous outbreaks before the 2014 outbreak. The size of the circle is the number of deaths. So the bigger the circle, the more people dying. And a picture is worth 1,000 words. Previous outbreaks, West Africa outbreak. Bigger, more patients. Right now, the number of patients and the number of deaths from the West Africa outbreak are bigger than all of the other outbreaks combined. And it's in a completely new area. So yes, it is overwhelming, it is unprecedented. A bit of a timeline. I don't know if you can read things clearly, but I'll go through everything quite quickly. In March 2014, well, actually in February 2014, there were several deaths in the forest region of Guinea. And the cause was unknown. MSF, which was already in Guinea at the time, was actually asked by the Ministry of Health to investigate. And my colleagues over there went and investigated, and they say, this is very strange. It's hemorrhagic fever. It looks like Ebola. But Ebola is not in this region, so what is it? Anyway, they sent samples, and true enough, it was Ebola. So on the 22nd of March, the Guinean government declared an Ebola outbreak. In retrospect, we know now that the first case, patient 0, was actually a small child in Guinea who died in December. But it just started really coming into consciousness, and we started being aware of it in March. On the same month, in March, the first cases appeared in Conakry, the capital of Guinea. And also in the same month, at the end of March, Liberia reported cases. And in March 2014, MSF was already saying, hey, this is unprecedented, this is alarming. March 2014. In April, things started looking good. The numbers were going down. There were no new cases for several weeks. However, by May, MSF is saying, despite the decrease in patients, we must remain vigilant. And rightfully so, because there was a decline in cases end of April, early May, and then the 26th of May, the WHO reported cases and deaths in neighboring Sierra Leone. If you look at the map, the smaller square there, you can see that Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia are right next to each other. They share borders. So Sierra Leone in May. They started reporting cases at the end of May, but actually we know now that the cases had been, patients were falling sick of Ebola for weeks already before that. In June, MSF rings the alarm bell again. Cases are going up again. There's a resurgence. We have to do something. And in June, we started detecting cases in Monrovia, the capital of Liberia. In July, you had cases in Freetown, in Sierra Leone. Now, this in itself is alarming. Ebola is now showing up in 3 capitals: Freetown in Sierra Leone, Conakry in Guinea, and Monrovia in Liberia. And previously, like I said earlier, Ebola was only in small rural communities. Okay, so many things going on here, but just to say, in August in 2014, finally, the World Health Organization declared Ebola to be an international public health emergency. Now, we would like to think that they declared that because of what was happening on the ground, because of the people dying, and because we were up to our ears in patients. Unfortunately, we tend more to think that they declared this public health emergency because Americans had fallen sick of Ebola. So it's no longer, it's a very cynical point of view, but you see that Ebola was no longer just in these forgettable African countries. It can actually affect other people and cross borders. So International Public Health Emergency Declaration in August. In September, despite the declaration, we still hadn't seen much progress or much action on the ground. So once again, MSF is running around, knocking on doors, ringing the bells, pressing the alarm button, speaking at the UN Security Council, speaking in several UN gatherings, going to the press, telling anybody who would listen actually that, hey, we need to do something. We're completely overwhelmed on the ground. People are dying. At this time in September, my colleagues in Monrovia had to turn away patients at the door because we didn't have space in our treatment centers. In October, I got to Monrovia in October to be medical coordinator for the Liberia Ebola response. And when I was there were actually already people on the ground, but they weren't doing much. They were still planning, they were still trying to set up. So there was a response, but it was really slow. And in October, the response or the intervention that these other actors were setting up was actually in response to the needs of August. They were not responding to the needs of October. It was already completely different. Just as an example, the number of cases in Monrovia, in the capital, in October was already going down, but we had so many small outbreaks in the other provinces. Everybody was focusing on building treatment centers and setting up beds in Monrovia, not outside. So anyway, there was a response, rather slow, and by the end of December, the WHO reports 20,206 cases of Ebola and almost 8,000 deaths. Now, why did the virus spread so widely and quickly? First, let's look at internal issues that we have noticed. In the countries that was affected, there was fear and suspicion of the unknown virus. They'd never seen this before. Unsafe burial practices. The Ebola virus is very concentrated in the body fluids of corpses. And in the culture in these countries is to touch the body, wash the body, and it is such a significant contributor to the spread of disease. There was a mistrust in politicians and anything that they said, not unusual in any country. People were hiding cases. They were hiding patients in their houses. They were hiding dead bodies and secretly burying them because of the fear and suspicion and the mistrust. Now, the last two are actually the key factors. We have to understand that Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia have gone through decades of conflict, and they were just starting to recover from these decades of conflict, and their public health systems were extremely weak, and they did not have the capacity or the resources to recognize and efficiently respond to the outbreak. And also, and I already mentioned this before, the urban setting. It's the first time that Ebola has actually shown up in cities, and in cities you have dense populations, people living very close to each other, people living in slums. So the contact and the transmission is higher. And also people are moving around. They go around the city, they go in and out of the city, they hop on planes, and they go to other countries. So that's why it was moving around very fast. Where we are now in terms of numbers, according to the World Health Organization, we have had over 28,000 cases of Ebola and 11,300 deaths, concentrated in the three countries of West Africa, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. And sadly, among those deaths are 513 health workers, and I find this quite tragic. And why? Let me just pull up numbers. Among these 513 health workers who have died from Ebola, 14 of them are my colleagues in MSF. Why is this so tragic? Like I said, health workers are such a rare, precious resource in these countries. In Liberia, you have a population of 4.2 million and only 51 doctors. If you think about it, that's 0.1 doctor for every 10,000 people. In Sierra Leone, you have a population of 6 million and only 136 doctors. That's 0.2 million per 10,000. 0.2 doctors per 10,000 people. And 500 of them have died. All right, so MSF, what have we been doing? We've been very busy. We saw over 10,000 patients in our management centers. Among those 10,000, 5,200 of them were positive for Ebola, and 52.6 of them have died. We had almost 2,500 survivors, which is a really good thing considering this strain can have a mortality rate of up to 90%. 90%, a mortality rate of 52.6% shows that we actually did make a difference in the care. And at the peak of the outbreak, there were over 400 international staff and 3,000 national staff working on the ground. And what are the components of this response? I'll just go through them very quickly. Isolation and care for patients. So you provide direct hands-on care. It's very challenging to provide care for patients when it's a disease with no vaccine, no proven cure, and around 50% of your patients are dying. And you have to do this in a suit, so the challenges are enormous. We also do contact tracing. So you trace the contacts of each patient and follow them to see if they show symptoms of Ebola. And considering that each patient has around 10 contacts that you have to follow every day, and in our treatment center in Monrovia, when I was there, we had around 120 patients. So 120 times 10, that's around 1,200 contacts you have to follow every day for 21 days. We do disease surveillance as well, so you have to make sure you have a system in place in the communities to detect ill patients and bring them to the hospital. We do awareness raising, so we raise awareness in the community. We tell them Ebola exists, what it is, what the symptoms are, what to do if you get ill, and how to protect yourself. And I think this was a crucial part this gave a crucial contribution in the decline of cases, the awareness raising in the community. We also, like I said, corpses are a huge mode of transmission, so we had to make sure there were safe burials. And also access to care for non-Ebola patients. Like I mentioned earlier, when I was in Monrovia, the number of patients in Monrovia was already going down. There were actually enough beds already for the patients in Monrovia. So at the time, if I were to fall sick of Ebola, there was already a bed available for me in October in 2014. But if I had appendicitis and needed an operation, there was no hospital in the city for me to go to because all the hospitals had shut down. The healthcare system completely fell apart. So when you think of Ebola or when you think of any large outbreak, you have to look at not just treating the disease, the outbreak itself, but also making sure that the patients the women who are pregnant that need to give birth, the children who have diarrhea and pneumonia, you have to make sure that they also have access to healthcare. And that is often forgotten. And we also did a lot of speaking out. MSF is known for its big mouth, and we didn't shut up on this one. And I showed you in the timeline that we were knocking on doors, ringing alarm bells for months before anyone listened to us. All right, so what did the Ebola outbreak show us? The Ebola outbreak actually just showed us the gaps and weaknesses in epidemic response, in the global epidemic response. A lot of the weaknesses I'm going to show you are not specific for Ebola. These weaknesses have been around for years already and have been festering for years, and Ebola has just uncovered it and exposed it. So what happened? What did we see? Clearly a lack of resources, clearly a shortage of skilled manpower, even in MSF. We didn't have enough people with experience in Ebola. We only had around 40 people. There were insufficient funds. And even when there was manpower and funds, many times the response was poorly adapted to the context. There was no clear political will. The whole time, since March of 2014, when MSF was talking about being overwhelmed, saying it was alarming, the response initially from the governments, especially of Guinea and Sierra Leone, was you're exaggerating, everything's fine, there's nothing wrong. Even the WHO sadly accused MSF of exaggeration. So there was a lot of denial and the downplaying of threat. And like I mentioned, whatever response there was rather inflexible. There was support to the government, but the support was mainly technical support and not hands-on care for patients on the ground. And also, there is this rather disturbing focus on health security. The global response to epidemics is now, it's only mobilized when there is a significant threat to other states. So when it's the threat of it crossing borders, when it becomes a security threat, it is the only time people actually mobilize their resources. Weak leadership capacities. So the people and the organizations responsible who are supposed to respond to epidemics, there was weakness in their leadership. There's also a lack of accountability. So the member states of the World Health Organization are not accountable and they don't take their responsibility. So then the WHO is not accountable. for for their responsibilities as well. So there's a lack of accountability on all sides. Economic interests are prevailing. One of the reasons why, and this is not just in Ebola, I saw this in other outbreaks as well, one of the reasons why the governments are so hesitant to declare an outbreak is because of the economic impact. You will have less investments, you'll have less tourists if you have tourists, so you don't want to declare an outbreak because you don't want to scare people off. Another thing about economic interests is a lot of these long-term funding mechanisms for health programs in the countries reward performance. So if you are not performing well, your funding will be withdrawn. If you declare an outbreak, that means you're not performing well, so you're afraid that your funding will be withdrawn, so you'd rather not declare an outbreak. All right? And priorities are defined by institutional donors and private actors. You also have very weak frameworks and reforms. We have the international health regulations, which are binding agreements that states are supposed to put into play when you have an outbreak to prevent the spread. As of 2013, only 20% of member states actually fulfilled the requirements of the international health regulations. So nobody, and until now, the requirements are not fulfilled by many countries. So surveillance and alert mechanisms are actually very poor and not put in place. And also, there's one thing about the role of UN agencies in humanitarian emergencies. Right now, they are seen as a provider of last resort. So they are there, they provide support, they provide technical assistance, and they're only expected to implement programs and intervene when nobody else can do it. That's how it is now, and we question that. Should they be the provider of last resort, or should they actually be the frontliners? Okay. The outbreak also exposed weaknesses in research and development. Not just in Ebola. Well, Ebola, there is no proven treatment yet, no vaccine, okay? But it's not just that. In many of the outbreaks and the diseases we deal with in the field, treatments are either non-existent or insufficient, or if they do exist, they're usually not adapted to the conditions in the ground, because there is really a lack in research and development for these diseases that we see. We see a lack of transparency in research and development. We don't know which research programs get funded. There's also this commercial drive. Research is directed by profit and not by the needs of the people on the ground. And the other drivers, sadly, are global security and biothreats. Ebola is actually a really good example of that as well. Since the 70s, Ebola has been largely ignored because it's affecting small populations in the African bush. And then in 2000, the US Department of Defense identified Ebola as a biothreat, like it can be used as a weapon. And suddenly people are paying attention to Ebola. So the state actually funded research for Ebola treatment and vaccines only when it was identified as a biothreat. And then, sadly, funding was cut and a lot of the research projects were also abandoned. And even when there is research and development and when there is innovation, it's very difficult for countries who need it to have access to these innovations, mainly because they're expensive. So what needs did we see there? One, early recognition and alert. We need a good understanding of the disease process, definitely. In Ebola, we don't have that yet. We're still trying to understand it. We need proper training. People need to be properly trained. We need proper monitoring and evaluation tools, including alert tools, so we know when to raise the alert. And we also need to make sure that states see sounding the alarm as a duty and not just as an option. Like, they have to be responsible. It has to be a responsibility for a state to sound the alarm when there is an outbreak. Right now, it's looking like it's just an option. Of course, we also need a swift response, something we didn't see during Ebola. You need properly trained staff, and that is a huge investment. You need the funds, of course, and you need the logistic capacity. When I was in Monrovia, one country sent a huge response team there, but it was all doctors. They did not have any logisticians, they were just doctors. We have to understand that outbreak response is also logistics and not just medical. We also need research and development. We need medicine, diagnostics, equipment, and vaccines. And lastly, and I put it in red, we need the political will. Because without the political will to do all of this, nothing's going to happen. Quickly through the recommendations. What do we recommend based on these needs? First, we recommend that we have to be operational again. Rebuild expertise, know-how, and operationality. A lot of people now are staying on the macro level. They're talking about resilience and capacity building. But when you have something as big as Ebola and it's a disaster, you have to get back down on the ground and get your hands dirty again, or get your hands bloody again, depending on the case. So what happened was people were supporting the Ministry of Health in Liberia, for example, when I was there. But they were actually just all in the meetings, and they were not providing care on the ground. So we have to rebuild the operationality, make sure that we have the capacity, we, meaning the global health community, have the capacity to respond on the ground. And also to make sure that your interventions prioritize the affected population in your health. And you have to address the urgent needs. Also, governance and transparency, I already gave you some examples. We need leadership, political will. States have to be accountable. Agencies, UN agencies have to be accountable. Even NGOs in the private sector have to be accountable because we all have our responsibility. And also to incentivize sounding the alert. Rather than what I mentioned earlier about withdrawing funding if you perform poorly, we have to make sure that people are incentivized, states are incentivized and supported to actually sound the alert and respond to an outbreak. And research and development, needs-driven. It has to be needs-driven. Please, let's forget funding, let's forget profit. Biosecurity, look at the needs on the ground and do innovations based on the needs on the ground. And outcomes of research and development should be considered as global public goods. So what are we doing? My last two slides. MSF commits to maintaining its capacity to do a swift, efficient, and hands-on response on the ground. And beyond maintaining our capacity, we want to strengthen our capacities by developing our in-house expertise in outbreak response, but also in working synergistically with other actors. Because we can't do everything, we can't prepare for everything, so we find the right partners, so we work synergistically with them. I'll tell you about it in the last slide. We commit to strengthen our resources so they're available and swiftly deployed, to improve our coordination and as well maintain our independence, and also to have a strong leadership. In the countries where we are working now, in the mission countries, we will be involved in the surveillance and alert system, working with the ministries of health, as well as in setting norms and standards and intervention protocols. And also we commit to innovating. I'll tell you about it in the last slide. And as always, we won't shut up. We will highlight the needs of the people that we assist and the failures in the system. We will continue to do that. Just a bit on innovation. There are three really exciting things we are looking at right now. We are working on it and in collaboration with other actors. So watch this slide because it will develop in the future. We are going to initiate a data sharing platform. Right now, MSF has a lot of data on Ebola, but also other organizations, the World Health Organization, the governments, we all have a lot of data, and everyone keeps it to themselves. So we want to put up a data sharing platform, so you put all the data together and you maximize the knowledge from all the data. We also want to do a biobank, which is, I think, quite ambitious. We have apparently 100,000, give or take, samples of blood, urine, stool, semen from Ebola patients. And we have our samples, the WHO has their samples, the CDC has their samples. This is a precious and finite resource, these samples from Ebola patients, and we can learn a lot from them to develop treatments, to develop interventions. So we want to set up a biobank and make these samples to coordinate this exhaustible resource and to help us in future outbreaks. And the last one is a multiplex fever diagnostic program. What we find in the field is we find a lot of patients with undefined fever, It could be Ebola, it could be something else, and it's hard for us to determine what this disease is on the ground. So what we want is a tool for us to determine the cause of fever and to be able to treat it properly. So all these three, we can't do it alone. We're working in partnership with other organizations, World Health Organization, Pasteur Institute, the private sector. We're working with Oxford University as well in these. So watch this space because it's going to be very exciting. Lastly, I don't know if I have another minute, just to show a film of the treatment center that we had in Monrovia. This is the 250-bed center we had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carriet and Dr. Reyes, for sharing your words of wisdom. Please take seats on stage. Mr. Carriet and Dr. Reyes have kindly agreed to take a few questions from the audience. Now, may I invite Professor Emily Chen, Assistant Dean for Development, Faculty of Medicine of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, to come forward and conduct the question and answer session. Professor Chen, please.
Well, okay, good, Professor Tony Nelson. But if I may start with, I would want to let my colleagues of Remy to first start with sharing with us a very important point before Tony's comment, please.
Yes, I think you still must have the last slide from Natasha in mind. What we are planning to do is to use the funds from the prize to fund these three initiatives. So this is what we want to do with the money that we received from this prize.
Thank you, Remy. Okay. So, yes.
I'd like to thank you both for your great presentations, but also, more importantly, for the brave work that MSF does. I guess the question relates to the hospital attacks. I think the Kunduz attack was very clear who did it and what to some extent happened. I guess my question is for the other hospital attacks in Yemen and Syria, it seems to be less clear. Does MSF have any evidence that some of these may be false flags?
I think, of course, we are having our reading. Our reading doesn't make it an evidence. We know, and the population knows, what are the planes that are flying above, and we know what are the parties that are, fighting, because we are in constant contact with them. We have been in contact with Saudi Arabia, we have been in contact with the Russians, we have been in contact with the US, so we are continuously keeping the contacts and the door open to tell them what we are doing. So is MSF having proof? No. Do we have an understanding of what has happened? Yes, each time.
Okay. In view of time, we can take 2 or 3 more questions. Yes, Professor Yao.
I'd like to join to congratulate MSF for the legendary work you have done. I think your work is familiar to many of us. I just want to ask a question about, because the type of work you do, there are a lot of things that you do not anticipate. I'm just wondering in terms of how do you build your search capacity, because there are great demands on MSF, so how do you actually deal with these surges that you encounter like Ebola?
That's a very good question. And, you know, internally we are having a lot of debates. I think in terms of capacity, our only asset is our people and the commitment of the people and our knowledge. And I think we are a pretty good organization in transmitting knowledge, you know, over generations. Ebola has been probably in, you know, the time I've been working for MSF, the emergency that stretches us to the limits. Because next to Ebola, we had also to manage all the rest. Our organization has never been so stretched. And at a certain moment, and this is also where we were calling, you know, others to join, was to say we cannot anymore. Human resources, we don't have enough. Our logistic capacity is full speed. And we have reached, you know, I think nearly the limit of the organization at this stage. We are having, you know, people that are coming, staying with us for a couple of years that are willing to continue to work. Natasha, you know, on emergency and being specialized on emergency. We are able to mobilize internally a lot of doctors and a lot of staff all over the world. And you don't need to press hard to have them coming. When Ebola is coming, you have to tell them, okay, we have rosters, but we are having a lot of people that are committed to continue to work with us in these environments.
I'd like to ask, what kind of protection do MSF provide for your workers? I know it's difficult. You work in war zone, you work in infectious disease outbreak, but in terms of training, in terms of insurance, in terms of any kind of protection?
For one thing, if like me, when I work for MSF, I'm willing to take a certain amount of risk. There is a certain amount of risk that every MSF field worker takes, or everybody who's working in those countries. That being said, just looking at Ebola, for example, when I was there, I knew that I could fall ill of the disease as well, but seeing the training that I received from MSF before I went, and seeing the biosecurity protocols that we have in terms of, you know, the spacesuit and how to behave, we have very, very strict protocols for that. And actually that made me feel quite safe when I went there. Our protection procedures, our personal protective equipment procedures are actually stricter than World Health Organization ones. So in that sense, you do have protection. In other issues as well, like security, we have very strict security protocols tailored to each project and to each country, which are quite strictly enforced. And we negotiate with all sides of the conflict to know, so they know that, you know, why we're there and what we're doing. And personally, one thing that I think really protects us is our medical identity. We do good professional medical work in the field, and most people see that. And I think that really protects us as well.
The last question from the gentleman in the shirt.
Thank you, Mr. Carrier and Dr. Reyes, for the very inspiring talk. I would like to ask just one question, and since I think the principles that guide all the actions of MSF in the conflict zones are very important, it seems that to me. So I just browsed through the website a bit very quickly, and I found that I have a question for you. How do the principle of neutrality, impartiality, and also the bearing witness support or not support, or do anything with that helps with your actions of MSF in conflict zones? It seems to me that MSF is a very mission-driven organization to me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this question. This is the core of our capacity to intervene in war zone is to be neutral. So you have to explain to all parties, who you are, what you do, but the most important is that you need to do what you have promised to do, and you need to deliver quality. Today, what we realize with Afghanistan, for example, we have been in contact with the government, we have been in contact with the Taliban, of course. We were in contact with the regular US forces, not with the special forces. We did a mistake. We were not talking to the special forces at the time. So we had to go to Florida now and to try to make that. That's global level. At the local level, the people that are going to protect you is the community. Okay? And if you deliver quality services in your hospitals that are free of care, and that the population sees that, you are matching your objectives, that you treat everybody in an impartial way, then the environment is conducive to be able for you to work. So, for example, today MSF is not in Somalia. We are looking at going back to Somalia. We got 2 of our colleagues killed 3 years ago. Because we cannot have neither the community, neither the political environment, neither the outside force that are active in Afghanistan to promise us that this place is safe. So unfortunately, and it's very difficult for MSF today not to be in Somalia, but that's the reality. We cannot, have people understanding that we are neutral, impartial, and that we will make a difference. So we keep on negotiating, but, this is part of our daily struggle.
With that, thank you very much for the question. If I put into context too, because yes, MSF is very vocal, but staying silent, turning heads away is also a political statement. So I urge everyone in this room, if you actually support the MSF ideals, which in this university we do, the stickers. Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity for us to share, and anyone who's interested with the MSF endeavor, please come into the front to talk to the 2 speakers, please. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. For Mr. Carriette and Dr. Reyes, please remain on stage. To show our appreciation, may I invite Professor Joseph Song to present souvenirs to Dr. Chus Liu, President of MSF, Mr. Carriette and Dr. Reyes. Professor Song and Dr. Liu, please. Thank you.